Buen Camino pilgrims. I am Jeremiah Gibbs and I'm your Camino guide, and today I just wanted to do a kind of year in review of 2021. It was a pretty odd year for the Camino de Santiago, and really just wanted to take a chance to think about what has happened this year and how has it affected the Camino, and what might this year mean for the future of Camino de Santiago as well. So stick around, and I hope that you'll find this interesting as you maybe think about planning your own Camino and think about how the changes for this year might have affected your planning as you're thinking about this next year coming up. So our year started off, of course, already in the midst of COVID, and really 2020 had been not a year of complete shutdown for Camino de Santiago. There certainly were people, especially folks who were local, who were walking Camino, maybe folks who were living in Galicia where they were sort of inside the travel restrictions did actually make Camino in 2020, but there were very, very few pilgrims, of course, because there was many of them that did walk Camino in 2020 were doing so against regulations, unless they happened to have lived in Galicia. So I'm sure there is exceptions, and folks can mention those in the comments if they want, but for the most part, 2020 was quite a year of shutdown for the Camino because of COVID. But 2021 was different for a couple different reasons. First of all, 2021 was a holy year, and there was a lot of anticipation for this holy year because, for about 20 years now, we have had year-over-year growth for the Camino, and pretty much every year has been larger in numbers than the year before. So the Camino has just grown astronomically, and in that time period, in the greatest part of that growth, we haven't had a holy year. So the last holy year was 2010. That was a big year for Camino de Santiago. And then because of how the holy year works, so if you don't know how that happens, July 25th is the Saint's Day for St. James. And any year that July 25th falls on a Sunday, that's determined to be a holy year. So there's the Jubilee door is opened. There's a whole set of liturgies that are associated with the holy year, including entering that Jubilee door and so on. So there's a whole set of things that happen only on the holy year, and including for Catholics, the plenary indulgence associated with making Camino during the holy year. So because it falls only when July 25th falls on a Sunday, once in a while there's a leap year that just makes the distance between holy years longer. So the calendar normally moves one day a year. So if July 25th was on a Monday, it'll be on a Tuesday next year, and so on. But because of a leap year, we had 11 years between holy years. That was the longest it can be, first of all, but it was during this period of great growth for the Camino. So there was so much anticipation for this holy year, and then for COVID to really kind of interrupt what was possible was, I think, really significant. So really there was a number of ways that changed things, including the liturgies associated with the holy year were modified, and some of them happening outside and different things, and that was probably all fine, but of course there's a lot of anticipation for the number of pilgrims who would likely make pilgrimage in a holy year. There's economic impact, of course. There's the kind of spiritual renewal that comes with having a holy year and having the pilgrims come for that. And then most of that was curtailed by, at least in the first part of the year, because of COVID travel regulations. But what ended up happening is, as Spain continued to increase their movement throughout the country, as travel restrictions were lifted, and some of those in controversial ways. There were times when folks were able to enter the country from outside of Spain, and even locals were not allowed to go to the next region to visit families. And so, there were times of when Spain was eager to increase their tourist revenue, which is a big part of the Spanish economy, and so they were beginning to lift regulations in ways that many people said didn't make a lot of sense. But regardless of whether it was the right thing or what the right thing might have been, travel began to open up really in May, June. By July, they were welcoming folks from other countries who were allowed to travel with vaccination and so on, which is then when I decided to travel to Camino in July of this year to walk a couple of weeks on Camino Frances for a section that I had never been on. So I had a chance to experience some of that. Now, I would first thing to say, there was a lot of anticipation as well about what would happen when pilgrims made their way back, but there were albergues that were closed because of COVID. There were bars that were closed because there was not enough traffic for them and so on. Like, what is that? How is that going to impact the Camino experience when many of the facilities that we use on pilgrimage would be either shut down or just simply not open back yet? What would capacity be like? And of course, there were reduced capacities in the albergues as well because of beds. There were different times when it was one for every 2 or one for every 3 beds and so on. So, there were some pretty tight restrictions, and folks were just like, is this really going to be, first of all, is it still going to feel like the Camino? And second of all, is there going to be capacity on the Camino for the pilgrims who are making their way back? So just a little bit about numbers, and did people actually come back? And the answer, I think, is unqualified yes. So just a few numbers. July of 2019, which was the biggest year for Camino de Santiago and the year prior to COVID, of course, there were 53,000 pilgrims who walked in July of 2019. In July of 2021, there were 34,000. So, we're talking, what is that, about 60% or so of the largest year on record in July. And then in 2019, August of 2019, there were 63,000 pilgrims, and in 2021 for August, there were 44,000 pilgrims. So again, we're talking about somewhere around that 60% range of those who are walking Camino, compared with pre-COVID, the largest year on record as far as the number of pilgrims. So we're really rebounded at that point pretty significantly. Is it as big as it was prior? Well, probably not, but it's still completely rebounded. And what I would say is that throughout the time that I was on pilgrimage, there were no bed issues as far as having capacity for beds, having capacity for bars, having bars that are open. It was a bit different in the sense that there were times when bars were not open as early and things like that, just because there was less travel. There were fewer pilgrims, and so there were times when, for example, you couldn't eat at 6 or 6:30. You had to wait until 7 or 7:30 for a bar to be open in the morning, that kind of thing. But for the most part, even though there were some slight differences, the Camino was still operating in all of the ways that I have come to expect. I do think that when folks, especially in August, July and August, as folks got closer to Sarria, there were, I think, some bed issues as far as just capacity, because I think what happened is that in the earlier parts of the Camino, the folks who could take the time to make that long pilgrimage were fewer than in previous years, for sure. And I think there were probably more pilgrims walking that short distance to earn the Compostela in a holy year. And so I think there were a lot of pilgrims just walking the last bit to earn the Compostela. And because of that, there were some bed capacity issues in that last 100 kilometers. My friends who I had walked with in earlier parts of Camino Frances, when they got to Sarria, there was times when they couldn't get a bed or had to reserve days in advance. And of course, we're reserving the day of in most places as we were walking. So there were some bed capacity issues late on the Camino, but for the most part, the experience of Camino was unchanged, I think, even with some reduced capacity and some places that had closed down. There were certainly places that were still closed when I was there in July. I fully expect, my estimation is, just understanding economics, not understanding everything about that's particular to the Spanish economy, but by understanding the way economics work, it's only a matter of time before the demand is met by open albergues. That people are going to open new bars and open new albergues to meet the demand of however many pilgrims are there. That may be a slow response, though, so it'll be interesting to find out what happens in the first part of the year as things get going again in 2022.
It's good. It's good. It's not as good as it can be. No seafood?
Many people have wondered whether the relationships would be the same post-COVID, whether that was because of how people were acting differently towards one another with fear of infection, or whether the Camino regulations would prevent the kind of relationships that we've come to hope and love and expect on Camino. And I can just say, I had the most amazing Camino experience that I've had so far on that pilgrimage this summer, meeting international pilgrims, building deep friendships in a short period of time. All the things that I love about Camino were absolutely happening in that July pilgrimage for me. And so I would just say, I don't believe that the Camino has changed because we're wearing a mask and because there are maybe fewer people allowed into an albergue or something like that. Camino experience was as good as it had ever been for me. Did it mean we wore a mask when we were out in public? Yes, of course it did. But even when you were with pilgrims that you were walking with on a regular basis, most of the time they were not wearing masks when they were staying together because you're together all the time. You kind of figured at that point you're a bit of a bubble, just the way that you moved together. And so I think that on the whole, the Camino experience and the relationships that form were not changed at all by the way that COVID affected patterns and practices. And of course, by the end of the year, Camino travel was quite strong. There were still people making pilgrimage. Of course, Omicron variant of COVID was really just starting at the end of the year there, and has become quite dominant in Spain. There are a lot of cases, even as I'm making this video. For the United States travelers, Spain is now a level 4 travel destination based on, they have last I checked, they had about 600 cases per 100,000 inhabitants. So, that's not good, obviously. Thankfully, because so many are vaccinated in Spain, at the end of the year, vaccination rates were above 90% of those who are eligible for vaccination in Spain have received the vaccine. So, vaccination rates are very high. Those who are getting sick are not getting as sick as they were before the vaccine and before the first, in the first waves. And so the situation is not good in Spain with regard to COVID, but I think it's much better than it has been. And I fully expect that with so many people vaccinated, that the Omicron variant is going to run its course, and folks are going to be back to travel again and so on pretty early in the year. I don't know what that looks like. I'm not that kind of a doctor, but I do think that we should expect that things will, at least by the middle of the summer, we'll be in a similar situation to where we were last summer, which is that travel will be allowed and Camino will be open again. I don't know what to think about the extension of the Holy Year into 2022. It was probably the right thing to do, so that folks would not have to try to rush in to get that Holy Year experience. It gives them a second year to do that. It was probably the right thing to do, but it is a bit odd to just say, okay, well, now we have this additional Holy Year that wasn't before. But everything's a bit odd right now with COVID, so it is what it is. So I hope that you are looking forward to Camino in 2022. I hope that some of you are beginning to plan that pilgrimage. I know that I am looking forward to making the pilgrimage in May of this year. I've got a group of students have already gathered. I believe there's 32 of us, 33 maybe, who are planning to walk Camino from Astorga to Santiago in May. So I'm looking forward to Camino for sure. Hopefully the travel regulations will allow us to do that by May. Only time will tell, of course. But I'm looking forward to getting back on Camino de Santiago. I hope that you will be able to make plans that are appropriate for your situation, for your health concerns, and get out there and make Camino as well. If you are planning on making Camino, I hope that you'll subscribe to my channel. I've got videos that talk about the logistics of Camino. I've got videos that talk about kind of planning tips and gear equipment for Camino, as well as theology and spirituality of Camino de Santiago too. So please subscribe to the channel. Click the like button. That helps me get the word out about these videos, and I really appreciate it when you like. And I hope that you will put in the comments a little bit about your plans for Camino for this year. Tell us what you're hoping to do in 2022. Will you make the Holy Year pilgrimage? And I look forward to seeing you on the road. Buen Camino, pilgrims.